Right. Let's start. Right. So let's see this requirement here. Suppose assume that we have one Webdynpro view, something like this. This is a Webdynpro view, which should contain some input fields. It should contain some three input fields. Assume this as first number, and this is something second number, and this is something what addition. Okay, and okay, let me just move this. First number, second number, and what addition. Next, I require one button here. So like addition. So my requirement is this is my Webdynpro view. In the runtime, the user is going to enter the values for what first two input fields. Okay. When I click on this button, I should perform the sum of these two and store it in what third input field. So if you want to do the same thing in module pull screen, suppose assume that this is your module pull screen. Okay. Yeah. So assume that, one second please. Yeah, assume that this is your module pull screen. I want to do the same thing in what module pull. So how do we approach here? Yeah, this is your module pull screen. So in our module pull, for every input field or every element, you will give what some names. So assume that the name is what io1, io2, and this is what io3, and assume this is a button. Okay, so button name is what something b1, and for every button we'll give what function code. Assume that this function code is what fc1. So first what I'll do is, let me first let us understand the logic in what module pool, then we'll see how to do it in what Webdynpro. So this is our module pool screen. So in module pool we know that whenever we click on any push button, what is the event triggered? PAI event. So what I'll do in the PAI event module. Okay, so assume this is a PAI event module. Okay, what is the logic you'll write between what module and what end module? Between module and end module you'll write the logic. What is the logic you'll write? Suppose I need to refer to this particular fields. So what you will do in the program, you will declare what same variables. You'll declare variables with the same names as that of what your screen element. So assume that this is io1. Okay, type what integer, and then I'll declare another variable io2, type what integer, then I'll take another attribute io3, type what integer. Okay, then what you'll do, you'll write the logic case what something psi ucom, and you'll say when function code. What is the function code here? fc1. When fc1, you'll say something io3 is equal to what io1 plus io2, and what end case, something like this you'll write the logic. So end for case is what end case. So what I mean to say is, in our normal abap module pool, okay, if you want to refer to the screen elements, what you will do, you will declare the variables in the program with the same name. Okay, so assume that these are what names of the elements. These are the names of the elements. So you will declare what the same variable names in the program also. These are the names of the variables. Done. Now I have to do the same thing in what our module pool. Am I clear? So this is how you'll, sorry, same thing you have to do it in what Webdynpro. So how do we do it in Webdynpro? Yesterday we understood that whenever we click on the button in Webdynpro view, what is the event triggered? Action event. Action event. So what you will do here? You will say here what? And for every action, we understood that one event handler method gets generated. So what you'll do, you'll write the logic inside what? Method. What is the method name? On action followed by what? Action name. Okay, something like this. On action, action name. Assume that the action name is something what? Add. Okay, assume that the action name is add. So if the action name is add, what is the method name now? The method name is what? On action followed by action name is what? Add. So inside this method we need to write the logic. So why we are writing the logic inside this method? Because for this button we will define what? Action event. I, while defining the action event, assume that I'll give the action name as what? Add. I'll give the action name as add. Okay, on behalf of this action, one method gets what? Generated. What is that method name? On action followed by what? Action name. So inside this, I have to write the logic. So the main thing you have to understand is, in case of our module pool, to refer to the screen elements, we will declare the variables in the program with the same names. Okay, so whatever the value I entered here, the same value will be stored in this particular variable. But whereas here in Webdynpro, everything is related to what? Context. So if you assume this as your view, okay, what is the view context I need to create here? So assume that this is your view, what? Context. Okay, in this view context, yeah, first of all we should get an idea what is the context we have to create. Okay, what is the context you have to create? What is this what are these elements here? Input fields. Okay, so each input field can store only what? One value. So what you'll do, you'll create what? Attribute. I can do in two ways. What I can do, I can create a node. Under that node I can create what? Three attributes. Otherwise directly I'll create what? Three attributes. Why I'm not going for a node? Because I don't want to show this as a form. If it is a form kind of thing, then I can go for a node and I can bind with the node. But I'm assuming these are what? Individual fields. So that's the reason I'll directly create the attributes under what? View context. So assume that I'll give the attribute names as what? Attribute 1. Let me give the type as what? Type is what? Integer. Then I'll give another attribute, attribute 2. Let me give this as what? Type as what? Integer. Then another attribute what? Attribute 3. Okay, let me give it as what? Type as what? Integer. So I declared what? Three attributes of type what? Integer. So let me put it here. Right, this is my view context. So what I have to do now, I need to bind this what? Input field with what? Corresponding attributes. I need to bind each input field with the corresponding attributes. This process we call it as what? Context binding. Okay, we call this as what? Context binding. Okay, so one second. Right, so this is nothing but what? Context binding. Okay, so let's see how to do it. So this is the overall requirement. So how do you proceed now? In the runtime, user is going to enter the value for what? First input field and what? Second input field, and he'll click on the button. So when I click on the button, I should refer to the what? Element. So here also in Webdynpro also, for every UI element we create, we'll give the ID na. So assume that I'll give the ID for this as what? IP1, that is input field 1, something like this, and assume this input field 2, and assume this is what? IP3. Here what are the names I gave? IO1, IO2, IO3. Here I can directly refer. In Webdynpro also, for every UI element we create, we'll give what? ID. Assume that these are the IDs. So let me put it here. These are nothing but what? IDs of the elements. IP1, IP2 and what? IP3. So now here I cannot write like this. I cannot say IP3 is equal to what? IP1 plus what? IP2. This is not possible in case of what? Webdynpro. In our ABAP, I can directly refer what? The screen elements by declaring a variable with what? Same name. but here it is not possible. So what I have to do here, in the program always you have to refer to what? Context. In the program always you have to refer to what? Context. So what I have to do, if I have to read the value of this input field 1, what is the name here? IP1. It is binded with what attribute? ATTR1. So the first step what I have to do here, what I have to do here is, first step is I have to read the value of the first input field na? So nothing but what? Read the value of the what? Attribute what? ATTR what? 1 and what? ATTR2. What are the attribute names? ATTR1 and what? ATTR2 into what? Some what? Local variables of type what? Yes, integer. Why integer? Because I declare the attributes also as what? Integer. Done. What is the next step you have to do now? Yes, perform the what? Sum of the above two integer what? Variables and store the same in what? Some third variable. Understood? What is the next step here? This third variable value I have to put it in what? Third input field. Third input field is associated, binded with what? Attribute 3. So what I have to do here? Here I have to say set the value of the what? Set the value of the what? Third variable to the attribute. Which attribute? ATTR3. ATTR3. Okay. So what I mean to say is every attribute in Webdynpro is associated with one getter method and what? Setter method. Okay. So here what you have to do, you have to call what? One method called as what? Getter method for reading the value of the attribute. And here in case of set, you have to call which method? Setter method. So this is how you have to write the logic in what? Webdynpros. Am I clear to everyone? In our module pool, directly I can refer to what? Screen elements. But in Webdynpro, I cannot refer to the elements from the program. I should refer it to what? Binded attributes and what? Binded node. So in this context, I am not referring to any node. I am referring to what? Individual attributes. That's the reason I am going to read the values of both the attributes. Is it clear to everyone online? Right? Okay. So let's see this programmatically. I'll just save it. Reading and setting what? Attribute values. So let's see this. So let me connect to the server. Right. So as usual, I'll go to Object Navigator. Right. So in this Object Navigator, I'll choose what? Webdynpro component slash interface. Webdynpro component slash interface. I'll give the name of the component Z10MWD. What? 2 is already done yesterday. So I'll go for what? 3. Yeah, 2 is already there. So I'll go for Z10MWD3. So I'm trying to create a Webdynpro component. Reading and what? Setting. Reading and setting attribute values. Right. I'll give the window name as underscore what? Window. View name, let it be what? Main view. Okay. Any of in this context, how many views we require? Only one view. So let me give the view name as main only. Continue. right? I'll save it in the local object. Right. So first what I have to do here, already the view is what? Available. So far yesterday and day before yesterday, what you have done is we have directly designed what? Layout. Because we are not dealing with what? Data. Okay. So always, oh, one second, it got closed. Yeah, so far what we are doing directly, we are designing what? View layout. So first in this case, what is the requirement? I need to deal with what? Data. So first of all, what I have to do, I have to visualize my what? View layout. What is a view layout requirement? I want some three input fields, and I want what? One button. What is the purpose of these input fields? To deal with what? Data only na. And each input field can hold what? Only what? Single value. So keeping this layout in mind, okay, I'm going to first create what? View context. So this is very important. We should never design the layout first. Always first you have to visualize the layout and then create what? Context. So that at the time of designing the layout, at the time of designing the UI elements, we need to set the properties for those UI elements. Those properties we have to bind with what? Your context attributes and what? Context nodes. So that is the reason. Make sure that first you have the context, then you create what? Design what? Layout. Okay, so let me create the view context first. So I'll go to SC80, right? So first let me go to acha. Already in the first class we know that whenever we create the component controller gets created, then window controller, view controller gets created. Okay, so this context, if you observe here, if I this is a component, if I double click on component controller, try to understand. In this component control also we have what? Context. If I go to the window level, if I double click on the window, at the window level also we are having what? Context. And at the view level also we are having what? The context. So we need to decide where we have to create the context. Okay, so anyhow I need to use this particular data only in this view na. So I can directly create the context at what? View level. If I create at component level also, I'll get the result, but performance issue. What is the lifetime of the context? If you create at the component level, that context will be available throughout the component, but I want that context to be used only in a specific view. So what I have to do, I have to create that context at what? A particular view level. Am I clear to everyone? So I need to create the context at a particular view level. Okay, so that is the reason. Let me create the context at what? View level only. Okay, so I'll directly go to the view level, that is main. Here we have what? Context. Okay, now again the next point is, what are the attributes and nodes that we create? What are the attributes and nodes that we create should be created as a child of root context. Am I clear? I repeat once again. What are the contexts that you want to create? I mean to say, what are the attributes and nodes that you want to create, that should be created as a child of what? Root context. Just like, suppose so far what you are doing, we are directly designing the layout. Where we are designing that UI elements, we are creating our UI elements as a child of what? Root UI element container. We are creating all the UI elements as a child of what? Root UI element container. Similarly, all your attributes are nodes. You can see here, if I at the view level, if I go to the context tab, left hand side is your context of your view, right hand side is the context of your component. So I need to create the context at what view level, because I have to use that data only in that particular view. Going forward, I may require the data in multiple views, so I'll create at what globally. I mean to say, I'll create at what component level. So as of now, this is called as what root context. Okay, I'm at the view level. Under this root context, this is called as what root context. Under this root context, let us create what three attributes. How do you create? See, right click on the what root context. This is my root context. Right click on the root context, create. What you have to create? Node attribute. I want to create three individual attributes, so I'll right click on the root context. This terminology is very important. This is called as what root context. All the nodes, all the attributes whatever you create should be created as a child of what root context. So right click on the root context, create attribute. When I say create attribute, it is asking what? Attribute name. It is asking the attribute name. Let me give the attribute name as what? ATTR1, any name you can give. That is asking type assignment, whether it is type or type ref2. If you are referring to a class or interface, I have to choose what? Type ref2. Otherwise, simply choose what? Type. Okay, type. What kind of data type you want? Okay, so I want to refer to what? Integer. So here I can refer to what? Predefined data types. I can refer to data elements. I can refer to domains, all those things. Okay, so I'll go for what? I. The, okay, so this is my attribute type I. And at the attribute level only you can see, if you want, you can give what? Default value. Okay, so we'll come back to that later on. Done, continue. Okay, so attribute 1 type I, type I, continue. So one attribute got created which is of type what? Integer. Understood? So at the attribute level, 1 second, let me just scroll up. Okay, so this is my what? Attribute. So if you see below, okay, we have what? Attribute is type I, and here you can see we have what? Default value. Here if you want to give any default value, you can give. I'll give something what? 10. Understood? So at the attribute level only I am providing the default value. Done. Let me create another attribute. So you can see that this attribute is created as a what? Child of what? Root context. Similarly, right click on the root context, create what? Attribute. I'll give the attribute name as attribute 2, type what? I. Done. If you want the default value for that, you give it, otherwise leave it. Okay, let me create another attribute. Right click on the root context, create attribute. I'll give the attribute as attr3, type what? I. Nothing but integer. So I created what? Three attributes as a child of what? As a child of what? Root context. As a child of root context. Done. Okay, so let me save it. So my view context is ready. View context is ready. Any questions so far? Please ask me. Okay, no errors were found. So my context is ready now. Once the context is ready, go for what? Designing the layout. So I'll go to layout. Done. So what is my requirement? I require what? Three input fields. I require three input fields and three labels and what? One push button. So overall I require 7 UI elements. I require overall 7 UI elements. So what I'll do is, first let me create the input fields. 1 second, it is reconnecting. Yeah. So I need to design three input fields. So how do we do, where do we design it? As part of what? Layout tab, and all the UI elements you have to create it as what? Child of what? Root UI element container. So just observe here. Right click on the root UI element container, insert element. I can give any name. I'll give the ID as something IP1, anything. What type of UI element you want to create? So I want input field. So I'll type INP. So I got input field, done. Okay, so input field is what? Design. Input field is design, done. Let me check whether I'll get any errors. So when I do syntax check here, when I do syntax check, good. So I got a syntax error. What is a syntax error here? Property value of the element input one must be what? Bound. So what is the meaning? For input field UI element, what is a mandatory property? Value property. Okay, so let me bind value property for the input field. So what I'll do here, for the input field, if you see the property window, there is something called as what? Value property. So you can see here, this is my value property. There is a button here. What is the descript tooltip I got? Obligatory binding is what? Missing. So it is a mandatory binding. So I'll just click on this, see what happens. I am at the view level now. When I, in the value property, when I click on this binding, when I click on this, what it is showing? It is showing me the context of my view now. That is the reason I told first you have to keep the context ready, then you design the layout, so that when you're setting the properties for the UI elements, always it refers to what? Your view context. So to which attribute I have to bind? Yes, attr one, done. So what is this? View name dot what? Attribute name. View name dot attribute name, done, done, done. Okay, so you can see done. Let me check the syntax again. When I do syntax check, I got a warning message kind of thing. What is this? Tooltip or label is not set for the element what? IP1. So what they are recommending, either you set the tooltip property or you define what? Label for that. So what I have to do here is here, for the input field, if you scroll down, okay, so we have what? Value property. We have what? Tooltip property. Okay, we don't have anything like what? Label property. So what they are saying is, they are saying either to set the tooltip or label is not set. So what I'll do, I'll take one label UI element. I'll take one label UI element. If you take our module pool environment, here we'll take IO fields, here we'll take text fields. Okay, here I need to take input field and what? Label. So how do you design the label now? See, right click on the root element container, insert what? Element. I'll give the id as something lb1, any name. What type of view element here? Label. Yesterday we have created what? Text view. Label will go when you want to provide the label for what? Input fields, drop downs, list boxes, all those things. So I'll go for what? Label UI element. Done. Label UI element got created. Now for the label UI element, you can observe there are two important properties. See, what are the two important properties? Label for and what? Text. We have designed this label UI element for whose purpose? For input field purpose. What is the name of that input field? IP1 or something I gave. So if you see here, label for, if I click on this, yes, what is this? IP1. I'll choose this. Text. What is the text you want to give here? Something what? First number. I got. So two important properties for what? Label UI element. What are the two important properties? Label for and what? Text property. So now you can see, did I got the label here? Yes. But first I want what? Label, then I want what? Input field. So I can interchange the position. So right click on the input field and I'll say what? Down. Okay, down. It is interchanged. Done. Is it clear? Like this, you create two more labels and two more input fields. Okay, so again, right click on this, insert element. I'll give IP2 something. What is the type of element? Input field. Let me set what? value property for this. Value property binded with what attribute? Attribute 2. Done. And let me take one more input field. Right click on this, insert element, IP3, what? Input field. For this input field, let me give the value property. What is the property? Attribute 3. Done. Then let me take some two more labels. I'll take two more labels. Right click, always right click on what? Root UI element container, because all the UI elements are created as what? Child of what? Root UI element container. Insert element, I'll give something lb2. What is the type of element? Label. Type of UI element is what? Label. Set the properties. Label for, I'll give what? IP2. Text, I'll give it as something what? Second number. Done. Save it. Then let me create what one more label. Insert element lb3 label, and for this label UI element also I'll set label for what? IP3. And let me give the text as something what? Addition. Let me arrange it properly. I'll arrange it properly, right? So IP2, I'll say IP3 as what? Down. IP2 as what? Down. So LB2 and so and so. Then again IP3 as what? Down. Right? So they are aligned something like this. Done. Then what else I require? Okay, so what you have to understand here is what is the property I have binded for the input fields here? Yes, what? Value property. Okay, this is called as what? Context binding. Okay, done. So I require one more, but one more UI element, that is button. Na? So I'll just right click on what? Root element container, insert element. I'll give the ID as B1. Type is what? Button. Okay, so button got what? Created. And for this button, what are the minimum properties I have to set? Text property. Text, I'll give it as something what? Perform what? Addition. And what is the purpose of button UI element? To perform an action in the runtime. So in order to perform the action in the runtime, I need to handle this event. So for this on action event, we have to associate what? Action name. So I'll just click on this. I'll give the action name. Let me give the action name as what? Anything. I'll give the action name as something what? Add. Description, I'll give the description as something perform addition of what? Two numbers. So here I need not attach any outbound plug. So if you are navigating from one view to another view, then only you have to attach what? Outbound plug, otherwise leave it. Okay, so I give the action name. Action name is what? Add. You can give any name. So when I continue, done, save it. So my designing part is what? Done. Designing part is done. If you go here, we have the action tab. What is the action name? Add. On behalf of every action we create, one event handler method gets generated. What is the naming standard for that? On action followed by what? Action name. I can check it in what? Methods tab. So in the methods tab, on action followed by action name. What type of method this is? Event handler method. What do you mean by event handler method? Event handler method means it gets executed whenever an event is what? Triggered. What is that event triggered in this case? On action event. When you click on the button in the runtime, what is the event triggered? On action. So for that on action event, what is the corresponding action I gave? Add. For that action, what is the corresponding method which got generated? On action followed by what? Action name. So this method will be called by what? SAP itself. Whenever the event is what? Raised. What event will be raised in this case? On action event. I need to write the logic inside this particular method. Okay, so before I continue, any questions, please ask me. Online, is it clear to everyone? Okay, done. So let us write the logic now. Okay, so where you have to write the logic? In the event handler method. So I'll go to methods tab. This is the method which gets executed now. So let me double click on this method. So we know object oriented. How do you implement method and what? End method. So inside this I need to write the logic. So what is the logic I have to write? Okay, first of all, let me check whether my what view is appearing or not. View should be embedded to window. Na? This is a default view which gets embedded by default. Okay, so let me cross check here. 1 second. 1 second, please. Yeah. Let me create what application. Na? So right click on what component, create Webdynpro application. I'll give the application name as underscore app what 3 continue. Right, let me save it. Save in the local object. Activate your component, activate your old component. Right click on the component and say activate. Right, so it got activated. Everything is active, done. Let me execute now. Right click on what the application and say what test. Oh, what happened? Yes, coming now. Right, so I can see here all the elements are added what one after the other. So by default Webdynpro will follow flow layout. Okay, so if you see here we have a concept called as what layout. If you take our module pool, we don't have a concept of what layouts. I can add it anywhere on the screen now. But here Webdynpro follows what layout concept. So if you see this what window view level layout, in the layout you can see, if I go to this what root to element container, what is the default layout here? Flow layout. So what is the concept of flow layout? In case of flow layout, the UI elements are added one after the other from left to right, top to bottom, left to right, top to bottom. If the first line is utilized, it will go to what next line, like that, top to bottom, left to right. So like this going forward we will discuss what different types of what layouts. Understood? Different types of layouts, done. So now that's why we are getting it one by one. And one more thing, if you have observed, in my when I'm creating the context, I created how many attributes? Three attributes. And for the first attribute, what I did for the first attribute, I gave what I gave what default value. What is the default value I gave? 10. That's why when the view is shown to us, when I run it, when the view is shown to us, I got the default value. So what I am trying to say here is context binding is bidirectional. Context binding is bidirectional. What do you mean by bidirectional here? We have set the value at what level? Yes, attribute level. So if I set the value at the attribute level, where it is stored, where it is shown to us at the element level. Why? Because this UI element is bounded with this attribute. Now in the runtime, suppose I'll enter 20 here. Where I'm entering the 20? In the UI element. This UI element is bounded with what attribute? Attribute 2. So this attribute will internally contain what value? 20. Understood? That's why I'm calling it as what? Bidirectional. Any values you set at what attribute level will reflect the corresponding binded UI elements and vice versa. That's why it is called as what? Bidirectional. directional. Okay, done. What is the next job now? Okay, this is 10, 12, 20. When I click on this, what is the event triggered? On action. Whenever that on action event is triggered, what is the corresponding event handler method we have? On action followed by what? Action name. That method gets executed. So as of now, I have not written any code in that. Let us write the code in that. Okay. So let me just minimize it. Let me write the code. So go back to what? Actions. I can double click on what? Action name, or I can double click on what? Event handler method. In both the cases, it takes a control there only. When I double click, it is staying there only. So what is the first step I have to do here? Read the values of the attributes what? ATTR1 and what? ATTR2, and store it in what? Two local variables of type what? Integer. So how many variables I require? Overall three. Na? I require three variables. So data, let me declare some local variables. Data, I'll say v underscore what? V underscore IP1, type what? I'll take v underscore IP, any names, type what? V underscore IP3, type what? Right, I declared three local variables. So what is the agenda now? I have to read the value entered in my first two input fields. Na? I cannot directly refer to what? UI elements. I need to refer to what? Bounded attributes. What are the attribute names? ATTR1 and what? ATTR2. So see this is important. The two attributes or three attributes, whatever I created, they are created as a child of what? They are created as a child of what? This is called as what? Root context. Already I told this is called as what? Root context. Okay. This root context is represented by a global interface. See here, if you go to class builder, we have a interface called as if underscore wd underscore context underscore what? Node. If underscore wd underscore context underscore node. This is the global interface given by what? SAP. So I repeat once again, whatever the attributes we are going to create, they are created as a child of what? Child of what? Root context. This root context is represented always by which interface? If underscore wd underscore context underscore what? Node. Am I clear? In this interface only, you can see here there is a method what? Get attribute. What is this method? Instance. Already we know interface components are always what? Public. I can call it anywhere. So we have a method what? Get attribute, and we will also have a method called as what? Set attribute. Get attribute and what? Set attribute. Is it clear to everyone? Okay, so I repeat, the context attributes and nodes that we create, we always create it as a child of what? Root context. That root context is represented by which interface? If underscore wd underscore context underscore what? Node. And if you see, first I have to read the value of what? ATTR1 and what? ATTR2. So what is the method I have to call? Get underscore attribute. What is the signature of this method? Let me go to parameter. If I go to parameter, yeah, there is an importing parameter which is what? Optional. So optional means what? I may or may not pass. There is one more importing parameter which is mandatory. What is this attribute name? What is that? What is the parameter name? Name. Name type what? String. So it is expecting the name of what? Your context element, nothing but your attribute. What is the name of the attribute? ATTR1. What does it do? It returns me what? Data. What data? It can be an integer, it can be a character, it can be a float, it can be a pack, date, time, class, interface, whatever it is. So your attribute is what type? Attribute is what type here? Integer type. Na already we have discussed attribute is what type? Integer. So when I read this attribute value, it exports me, it returns me value of what? Data, integer. That's the reason I declared what? Three integers. But these methods are what methods? What? Instance methods. Instance methods means what? What we require? Object. Na. Instance methods are always called by using the object. So can I create the objects for interfaces? No, we cannot create the objects for what? Interfaces. So what I have to do? Somehow I should have the object of this particular interface, so that using that object I can call what? Get underscore attribute. So from where we will get that object means here. In my view level itself, if you go to what? Attributes tab, in the attributes tab you can see there is an attribute here. What is this? wd underscore context, which is the object of ref2 is selected now. Object of which interface? If underscore wd underscore context underscore node. So what I mean to say is I cannot directly create the objects for what? Interfaces, but that object is given by what? SAP itself, and it is available in the form of what? A view attribute. It is available in the form of a view attribute, not context attribute. This is your context attribute, this is my view attribute. Am I clear? So can I call this as object? Yes. Type ref2 is what? Selected here. So what I have to do now? Using this object of this interface, I have to call which method? Get underscore attribute. So let me call it now. So I'll go back to the method. Yeah. So here, here, what the first step I have to do? Read the what? Values of the what? Attributes. What are they? attr1 and what? attr2. At a time I can read only one attribute value. So which attribute value you have to read? Yes, attr1. Okay, this is a child of what? Root context. Root context is always represented by which interface? If underscore wd underscore context node. In that only we have instance with the what? Get attribute. In order to call this instance method, I require what? Object. And that object is always available in the form of what? View attribute. What is that object name? wd underscore what? Context. So see the technique here. I can go to pattern because it is a global method. I can go to pattern. Done. Yes, ABAP objects pattern. What is the object given by SAP? wd underscore what? Context. What is the interface name? If underscore wd underscore what? Context underscore node. What is the method name? Get underscore what? Attribute. Where is it? Get underscore returns a value of what? An attribute. So done. Okay, there is an import parameter which is optional. Name. What is the name of the attribute? attr1. attr1. You have to give it in uppercase. attr1. It is importing, it is returning a value. I'll store it in what? V underscore what? IP what? So repeat this process. Yeah. Always any value in ABAP, if you are giving in single quote, should be given in what? Uppercase, because internally the names are stored in what? Uppercase. Yes, mandatory. Okay, I underscore what? Okay, let me try to give it in what? Lowercase. Let's see what happens. Okay, done. So like this I have to read what? Another, you understood why I use this? How do we understand here online? I have to read the value of this attribute, which is a child of what? Root context. This root context is always represented by which interface? If underscore wd underscore context. In that interface only, I must call one of the instance public method. In order to call that instance method, I require what? Object. But I cannot directly create the objects for what? Interfaces. So for that interface, object is always given by what? SAP, and that object is available in the form of what? View attribute. So I can directly use this particular attribute, which is the object. Okay, so repeat this process for what? Second attribute also. Second attribute, what is this? attr2. What is this? IP2. Then I have to perform the calculation now. V underscore IP3 is equal to what? V underscore IP1 plus V underscore IP2. Then what I have to do? Set the value for what? Which attribute? Third attribute. Set the value for the third attribute. What is that attribute? attr3. Okay, again this attr3 is a child of what? Root context. Root is represented which interface? If wd what? Context node. In this, what is the method I have to use call for setting the value? Set underscore what? Attribute. Every attribute will have two methods: get attribute and what? Set attribute. So you can see when I find next, we have what? Instance with the what? Set underscore at sets a value of what? Individual attribute. So if I go to parameters, what does it do? Index is what? Optional. Value is also what? Optional, but I need to set any of the value. What value? Integer value. Name, type what? String. So let me call that method. So again I'll use what? Pattern. Is it clear? So setting the value of the attribute. So I'll go to pattern here. Go to what? Pattern. ABAP objects pattern. What is it? Yes, Amit. Any value you want to set it on the view, don't think every time set attribute. Since it is an individual field, that individual input field is binded with what? Attribute. So if you are setting a single value, yes, it is set attribute. If you are binding a table, if you are setting a table, the method is different. If you are setting a work area, the method is what? Different. I am talking about as of now only what? Attributes. So what is the method name now? Yes, set underscore what? Attribute index value. Where is the value stored? IP, sorry, v underscore what? IP3. What is the name? attr what? 3. I am giving lowercase. It should not allow me. Let me check what happens. Done, huh? So this is the way you have to write the logic. Is it clear to everyone? So don't try to bayard this. How do we understand here? We have to set the value for what? attr1. Where is that attribute available? Child of what? Root. Root is always represented by which interface? If wd context node. In that interface, we have to call what? Get attribute method, which is the instance method. We require the object to call that instance method. I cannot directly create the objects for what? Interfaces. So SAP itself has given the object which is available, in the form of what? Yes, in the form of what? In the form of attribute what? wd underscore what? Context. So that's what I did here. Okay. So let me check it. Save. Check it. No syntax. No syntax error. Execute this. Okay. Activate this. Now let me activate your component here. Component is activated. Let me refresh it one. I'll say F5. Done. So here I'll enter 10 and what? Something what? 23. I'll click on this. What is the event triggered? On action event is triggered. Then the corresponding event handler method gets executed. What is the logic we try to wrote in that? We are trying to read the values of the attributes what? attr1 and what? attr2. So when I click on this, see now, oh, it's allowing. I got what? 33. So it is not giving me any what? Runtime error, but definitely we will get the runtime errors going forward. Okay. So always make an habit to refer this in what? Uppercase. As of now, I am not getting any what? Runtime error, but definitely when you are going for the advanced examples, we will get the issues if you give it in what? Lowercase. So my suggestion is always refer it in what? Uppercase. attr what? 1. Oh, yeah. What is this? attr 2, and this is what? attr what? 3. Let me debug this. Save it. Check it. I'll try to debug this, just try to understand everyone. I'll put the breakpoint here. Okay, I need to set what? External breakpoint. Why external breakpoint? Because it is executed inside what? Browsers. Okay, so in a separate window it gets executed. So I have to put what? External breakpoint. Done. Now let me refresh this once. Refresh it. Yeah, I'll enter the values here. Something 17, and here I'll enter something 27. I'll click on the button. What is the event triggered? On action event. Is it going there? Yes, you can see here. It is going to what? Debugging mode. It is went to debugging mode. Yeah. Which method? On action followed by what? Action name. So I'm trying to call which method? Get attribute. I'm passing what? Attribute name. It is going to read that value and puts it in what? V underscore IP1. So if you see V underscore IP1 at this stage is what? 0. So I'll say F6. I got what? 17. V underscore IP2. I'll say F6. I got what? 27. Then V underscore IP3 is 0. I'll say F5. I got 44. Then I'm trying to set this V underscore IP3 to what? Attribute what? 3. So I'll say F8. I got 44. Am I clear? So the most important point in this is I cannot directly refer to what? UI elements. I should refer to what? The binded attributes and what? Nodes. And every attribute will be associated with the two methods. Get attribute and what? Set attribute. Right? So any questions here? Why means what? At the what context level, for the attribute 1 I gave the default value na. I gave the default value is what? 10. So every time you'll get the default value only na when you refresh. Refresh means what? Re-execution. So what is the default value I gave? 10. At the attribute level, in the context at the attribute level I gave 10 for what? ATTR1. No. Obligatory is not. See, default value means what? The moment the view is displayed, I want to show some default values to the user. So that I can do it at what? At my context attribute level. Now I am not doing anything. I am not setting anything. So what is the default value for integers? 0 na? So when I execute this, what I got? Zeros. Because the default value for integer is what? Zeros. It's not obligatory. Just like if you take our what? Normal app, you'll say what? Sorry, what is this? Parameters x type I, what? Default what? 10. Okay, if you want to provide any default values for selection screen fields, we use default addition as part of what? Parameters. Here, if you want any default values, you have to set it as part of what? Attributes in the context level. That's why it is reflecting on the view. No. Here also we have obligatory concept. Okay, we are at the beginning level. Understood? So here, suppose when I execute this, I am not entering the value for this. Okay, I'll enter only the value for what? Second input field. When I click on this, what I got? 15. But my validation is what? I have to make this field as what? Mandatory field. If I don't enter, when I click on this, I should give a message. So that again comes under what? Validation of views. How to give messages in Webdynpro. That will come later on. But here we don't have any obligatory keyword here. But we can make the fields as what? Obligatory. We can make the fields as what? Obligatory. Yes. We have to write the logic for that. We have to write the logic for that.
Get attribute is just like as a reading the value. Set attribute to writing the value.
Yeah, get attribute is for reading the value of the attribute. Set attribute is for assigning the value to the attribute. These attributes are internally bounded with what? UI element. So it will reflect that. That's why I said bidirectional. I am reading the value of ATTR1 and ATTR2 means you have to understand that we are reading the values of what? IP1 and what? IP2. But in Webdynpro, I cannot refer to these elements in the program. I can refer only to what? Context. So entire Webdynpro is based on what? Context. Okay, so if you want to become strong in Webdynpro, we should know what context you have to create. We should know how to deal with what? Context. Once you are strong in this area, we can play with Webdynpro. Because anyhow, calling the methods anyhow we know, because already we are expected to know what? Object oriented, call method, set, all those things. Any questions, others? Yes. Okay. Yes, in Webdynpro we have a concept called as code wizard. We have a concept called as what? Code wizard. By using this code wizard, we can SAP will generate some code automatically. But why I have not started with this code wizard is, the problem with this code wizard is, yes, there will be some code generated by SAP automatically. In that generated code, I cannot directly use that code as it is. You have to do what? Some changes. You have to write what? Some additional code, or you have to delete what? Some generated code. So I should know where I have to do the changes. I should know what I have to delete. I should know what are the additional things I have to write. So that I can, that we can do only if you know how to write the code what? Manually. So anyhow, during our course, maybe after 1 week or 10 days, I'll start using what? Code wizard, so that in the generated code we will understand what changes we have to do, where you have to do the changes. Am I clear, Rambabu? Okay, so don't rely on what? Code wizard. In the interview perspective also, say that you are strong in what? Object oriented, and say that you know how to write the code manually. Okay, so don't highlight this in the interview perspective. Yes, once you become strong in Webdynpro, yes, we can start using what? Wizard, because we can understand the generated code. Okay, just to give a glimpse of that, I'm just what, this is the code I wrote it now. This is the code I wrote it. Now what I'll do, right? So I'll put the cursor here. Okay, there is a, on the application toolbar, what is this here? Webdynpro code wizard. Webdynpro code wizard. I'll click on this. Right, so it is asking what? Node or what? Attribute. What is the reader button selected? Read. So which attribute you want to read? Click on this. Which attribute? attr1. Okay, context dot what? Attribute 1. Continue. Okay, so if you scroll down, where is that? Yeah, if you scroll down, see here, there are some lines got generated from where? From 30th line to what? What up to what? Some 45th line. So if I have shown this initially, can you understand anything? No, no, we don't know what is this wd this. We don't know what is this get element. That's the reason I have not started with what? Code wizard. Okay, so most of the people will have a feeling that wizard is there, it is easy. Okay, yes, it is easy, but okay, the code is generated, now I have to do the changes. I don't know where to do the changes. That's the reason, don't rely on code wizard. First write the code manually for 1 week to 10 days. Later on, anyhow, we'll start using what? Code wizard. Am I clear? So those who are not strong in object oriented, they'll go for what? This wizard, and they'll do some kind of bayard kind of thing. They'll go there and they'll do the changes, but that is not the correct process. Okay. Suppose in future, assume that you'll get a issue in Webdynpro object developed by some other guy. You have not developed that code. So you have to understand his code. Na? That is the reason, better is always better to write the code what? Manually. So that we'll understand what changes, where you have to do the changes. Clear? So any questions further, please ask me. Right, so I just gave a glimpse of the code. Okay, so one small information. classes will be from Monday to what? Saturday. Monday to Saturday. But for tomorrow, for since this is the first week, there are other people who are going to join from Monday or Tuesday. Okay, they already know this initial part. Okay, so that's the reason. From next week onwards, we'll have it from what? Monday to what? Saturday, and we will increase what? Phase. Daily we need to spend at least what? 1.5 hour. As of now, we are spending only 1 hour or 1 hour 10 minutes. So from Monday onwards, we'll spend what? 1 to 1.5 hour at least minimum. And classes will be from what? Monday to Saturday. So next class will be on what? Monday around same time 10 a.m. I'll try to start by 10 a.m. We are not starting at 10 a.m. We'll try to start by 10 a.m. from Monday onwards. So tomorrow no class, but from next week onwards it will be from Monday to Saturday. Then only we can complete the syllabus by what? December, between December 20 to what? 25th. Only if you take it from Monday to Saturday, and we'll spend at least what? 1.5 hour per day. Okay, so this is the schedule, right? So next class will be on Monday at 10 a.m. Any questions for today? Please ask me. Yeah, yeah, Rama, please. What is it? You can unmute and ask, otherwise you can use the chat box. Yes, yes. As part of our course, I don't know whether you have attended the first session or not. If you see this, yeah, in the first session I said what are the topics we are going to discuss. Okay, we will see how to integrate our Webdynpro application inside what? Adobe Forms and what? Smart Form. I want to make one thing clear. See, our agenda is not to learn Adobe Forms here. Okay, learning Adobe Forms is again a separate module. Even if you sit for 1 month also, it is not sufficient. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll spend some 3 to 4 classes on how to develop Adobe Forms, simple Adobe Forms. Okay, how to call it from a driver program, how to integrate in what? Webdynpro, and we'll see how to develop interactive Adobe Forms. Okay, interactive smart forms is not supported, but interactive Adobe Forms is supported by integrating that in what? Webdynpro. Okay, so whatever we discuss as part of this Webdynpro, with that knowledge, you can say that you know how to work with what? Adobe Forms, how to integrate in what? Webdynpro. So that confidence I can give you. But from your end, you have to do lots and R&D what? With Adobe Forms. Whatever we discuss here is only for 3 to 4 hours. How to develop Adobe Forms, how to integrate that in what? Webdynpro, both offline and what? Online Adobe Forms. Any questions? Right? So next class we'll have it on what? Monday at what? 10 a.m. Right then online, I'm winding off. We'll meet again on Monday.